Welcome back for another episode of TechSpective podcast. I've got with me this time my very long time good friend, Mr. Michael Farnum. So, Michael, welcome. For those who somehow don't know, please introduce yourself.
I'm sure there are plenty of people who don't know. So thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Michael Farnum, been in IT and cyber since, 94. Current role in the professional world is advisory CISO for a company called Trace3. And my second job, which often is more, is I run a cybersecurity conference here in Houston. But I've been doing this stuff for, like I said, since 94. I think I got into security full time in probably 99. I think that was when I really started digging into the weeds. So I've been doing it a while. I don't know what else you want to know. I'm sure it'll all come out in the wash as we're talking. So,
well, and okay, so for starters, for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, you and I had some interactions. We met each other probably at an RSA at some point.
Yeah.
But we'd had some interactions. But then, for a couple of years there in like 2017-ish, we were co-workers at Alert Logic.
Yep.
But at some point along the way, like you mentioned, the security conference, you co-founded HOU.SEC.CON, the Houston Security Conference, which I will say sometimes if you go Google it, it's there is like something else that can also come up under Houston Security Conference. I ran into that with my son was working at the Houston Aquarium, and if you Google Houston Aquarium, there's some other aquarium that also goes by that name, but is not like the Houston Aquarium. Anyway, you have this Houston Security Conference, and the thing is, I think you could probably go to any major city, and there's some sort of localized regional conference that someone has put together. I think for me, what kind of separates HOU.SEC.CON from a lot of those is that it has matured, it has evolved to be a more broadly recognized event, in my opinion. I mean, you're not an RSA or a Black Hat, you're not a B-Sides, but somewhere approaching there.
Yep.
And just recently it has expanded. You've expanded the scope and the focus, and I want to get into all of that. But before we go there, just give me a little bit of origin story. What inspired you to create the event in the first place? And how'd you get it started?
I'd say the biggest thing that inspired me is I was going to the RSAs and the Black Hats, every year. I'd been doing that since early in my security career, and gone to a few of the B-Sides weren't around yet when we started. So I'd gone to a few of the regional conferences here that were all, excuse me, I don't want to name them because many people have been to many of them because they go to all these different cities. And I would go to those, and I just kind of started commiserating with other folks here locally. It's like those are all all the talks were very vendor specific talks, which is fine. I don't, that there's value in learning about vendors, but that's all it was vendor talks. And a lot of the people that went there were going there to try to find jobs, which is great. I support that, but it didn't have the feel of what back then I would say RSA still had that, nice feel of it was big, but it wasn't so big as it is now, and hadn't turned into something of a vendor con as well. And then I started, I knew of the little conferences. DerbyCon wasn't around there. We started the same year they did. I know they haven't con. So it really was just this, like, how do we get this local community going with a conference here without it being a vendor con and without having to spend an inordinate amount of money to go to RSA or Black Hat and the travel as well. I just wanted to build something here that had more value And that was really the inspiration behind it. You mentioned B-Sides. We almost rebranded at one point to a B-Sides just because that was really popular there, but we didn't. We just ended up keeping our own because we figured our brand had been established. It was about 2 or 3 years in at that point. So
Okay. So, I mean, I've been to I think a couple of the HOU.SEC.CONs. I actually presented at one. I want to say it was 2018. Just recently, you've kind of expanded the scope. So
Yep.
like it was HOU.SEC.CON forever, and just in the last like couple years, you've expanded some events. Some more like sort of niche specific spinoffs. And then you've also started the HSC user group. So talk to me about those things.
So yeah, we expanded into, well, let me start with the user group first. So I forgot to mention that as kind of part of the origin story as well. So I was working with, and I don't think they're around anymore, but there was this group that was almost like an ISSA, ISACA type of a group, called the National Information Security Group. Was out of the main chapter, was up on the East Coast somewhere. And they had probably 6 or 7 chapters running around. So I started a user group under them, kind of utilizing their structure that they had already put in place. And for those of us who know him, which is vastly wider array of people than know me, Jack Daniel was part of that as well. And kind of sort of how he and I got to know each other to some degree. Before he was doing the B-side stuff, he was involved in that National Information Security Group. So that user group format is near and dear to me. I love having that monthly interaction and people just coming in and talking. And I wanted to get that started again after we got HOU.SEC.CON going, but that was kind of what gave me the push to get the conference going as well. Was like, hey, I've already know all these people, and I was a pre-sales SC with Accuvon, if you remember them pre-Optiv days. So I met a lot of people in the region, had a lot of customers, so I was able to spread that around and talk to them about the user group, about the conference. So that's the big thing with the user group. That's the reason I brought that back, is because I'm just really like that format, like that conversational style, like having the food and everybody just having a good time. That one is pretty well attended at this point. We probably have 40 to 50 people come out every month for that. And we don't charge anything for that. We just want people to come out and have a good time with it, get some free food, have a little happy hour, and talk about some good stuff and hear a good presentation. So we do that every month. The other 2 events that we started up were actually events that started within HOU.SEC.CON as a separate track. So we've never specialized tracks that much within HOU.SEC.CON. What my whole concept and idea is I didn't want you sitting in one room and staying in that room and never getting around, because that didn't help you see your fellow practitioners. That didn't help the sponsors get any, sense of, hey, I've got some activity here. I'm willing to come back and do this again. So we never did specialized tracks, but we finally ended up doing a specialized track, one in operational technology and OT. And that was what we actually called back then the ICS track. And my co-founder, Sam, he works for Dragos, so he's a big OT guy, and he wanted to get that built out. So we built that specialized track out. And then Mark Crudgington, who was then the CISO of Wood Forest Bank, came to me and said, hey, we want to see if we can get an executive style track going. So we started that several years ago as well. So basically what we did was he took both of those, spun them out into their own conferences because they were extremely well attended and getting popular. And we created OT.SEC.CON or OT.SEC.CON out of the one and EXEC.SEC.CON out of the other. And those are growing. We really hold them twice a year in actuality, because we still do the specialized tracks at HOU.SEC.CON, but we kind of make them 2 conferences within the larger conference and then we do them other times of the year. So we've got OT.SEC.CON this year coming up April 17th, and EXEC.SEC.CON coming up April 22nd. We also curate the attendance on those, so you have to submit a request to buy a ticket before we let you buy a ticket, and that's not to be exclusive, even though it is kind of be exclusive, because what we don't want is, and salespeople, forgive me, I know you got a job to do, but we just don't want you coming out buying a bunch of tickets and it becoming a, just filled with a bunch of people trying to sell stuff.
Right. You want the, especially at EXEC.SEC.CON, I mean, you want the executives to be free to speak and interact with one another without being sold.
Exactly. So we do have sponsors at those events, but they're in their section and they're more than welcome to come out and interact with the guests. They paid for the right to do that, but we limit that number of sponsors as well. So we don't want to have those, so those are smaller conferences. OT.SEC.CON is actually growing quite a bit. We went from having one track of talks last year to we've got 3 this year. We had so many people submit talks. So it's growing very quickly. EXEC.SEC.CON will always be more intimate feeling. I mean, it's just the nature of those. Well,
one of the things, so is that, you talked about like the ISACs, and we have, you have all the like different industry ISACs, healthcare and banking, whatever. And for someone who doesn't know, I mean, the point being that people who are in that industry, people who are security professionals in that industry have, a unique threat landscape they're facing. They've got a unique attack surface to deal with, and they can interact and compare notes and talk about things that are specific to healthcare or banking or whatever. Where I see like a local event like HOU.SEC.CON in the first place, it's sort of like a Houston ISAC. It's like, okay, well, now you've got just Houston people kind of getting together to talk about things that are relevant in Houston. And as you spin these things off, well, actually, first let me say, even, it was never framed like this. It wasn't really this, but even in its original state, I sort of viewed HOU.SEC.CON as an OT thing because of its Houston centricity. Because I viewed, I said, okay, well, Houston is oil and gas. So like when I would talk with people about HOU.SEC.CON, I'd be like, well, it's a regional security conference or whatever. It's it's for Houston, but think of who's going to be there. Who's going to be there are going to be oil and gas people.
Well, there
are a lot of them.
What's interesting is you would think that was the case. When we first started, it actually was not the case because there was already a cybersecurity conference here locally. It's still around for OT specifically, which is the API cybersecurity conference it's now in the Woodlands, but it wasn't before. So we actually did not have as many oil and gas people as I expected it in the beginning. I think for a couple of reasons. Actually, one was the API cybersecurity or API security conference. The other was that a lot of oil and gas people that are in IT and security, and it's still the case today, I think, but it was more when we started this back in 2010. People go work there for 20, 30 years. Like they'll literally work there their entire life and retire. And a lot of those people, this is not throwing shade on them at all. They're generally not as active in the community sometimes, just because they've got almost like a lifestyle job, if that's a term, where they're in that job, they go work, they do great jobs, stay there for a long time, and they don't interact as much in the community. And I saw that as somebody who is trying to resell to them either products or services. I saw that on a daily basis. Like but part of that too was just because Houston didn't have anything. So what we generally had in the beginning was more of a broader spectrum of like healthcare. And part of that's because I used to be in healthcare as a security leader before I got into the dark side of pre-sales, architecture, and engineering. So I had some widespread, like just knowledge and connections in that group. Oil and gas, I did not have as much based on that background. It was more as a customer. So in the beginning, we really didn't have that as many. And then it really started expanding more. And especially when we started building the OT side, we've got a lot now. And it's to a point where we specifically try not to do it as an overlap to API conference at all, because we don't want to interfere with what they do. I have no idea if they pay attention to what our timing is, but.
Well, I don't know if you intended it this way, but when I looked at it, so kind of continuing the thought that I started with in terms of the focus, I looked at it and I said, okay, well, HOU.SEC.CON is still, it's got Houston right in the name, so it's more of a regional conference. I mean, you're not trying to go head to head with RSA.
Well, not yet.
Not yet. Yeah, right. There's no reason
you can ask me some questions about that if you want.
Because there's definitely some room there too. But no, what I was thinking is that I feel like spinning off OT.SEC in particular, to me, opens the gate a little bit, to where like someone who maybe wouldn't have looked at HOU.SEC.CON because they're not in Houston is now looking at it and going, oh, but I am an OT. Like that resonates with me. I should go to that. So it seems like it has the potential to help it grow, like beyond its Houston centricity.
Yeah, OT.SEC.CON in particular, definitely. So there's a couple of specialized OT security conferences. Like I think one's going on right now when we're recording this anyway, down in Miami, which is S4, and there's a couple of other ones. So yeah, you're right. This gives us the ability to expand beyond that from a geographic limitation. We've recognized that for several years now with HOU.SEC.CON itself, that is a limiting factor to us, even though we've grown more national. Like most of our submissions now, I would say are I don't know if most, but very close to half of them come from national audience. And then we've shied away from gathering hard data and requiring people to put certain information there, because it's one of the things that does differentiate us is we don't sell our list. We don't give our list to our sponsors, anything like that. We've got lead capture for them to use. So we don't hand any of that stuff off, and we have to fight them off like rabid dogs every year to say, we're not giving that to you. But what we have seen just kind of anecdotally is more and more and more of a national audience for us. So while you're absolutely right, OT.SEC.CON, EXEC.SEC.CON, they can see them filling different roles. OT.SEC.CON can definitely be national. We've absolutely got an eye this year as in ways of making HOU.SEC.CON a national conference. Fixing the problem without saying too much, fixing the problem of the geographical naming convention and that kind of thing. We've got some stuff in the works. Sam and I have announced it on our podcast that we're doing some of that. So it's not anything that's super secret, but it's definitely something we want to do and make this more of a national entity. Houston's there's a massive amount of people here already.
Right.
We're in the George R. Brown Convention Center that we moved in last year, so we can grow this thing to a 50,000 people plus conference if we wanted to, if we can. So there's all kinds of room to grow here in Houston, and Houston's actually a lot of people don't know is becoming more of a technical hub. I mean, everybody thinks of Austin and Texas as being that kind of second Silicon Valley kind of thing, and I absolutely don't think we're ever going to take that away from Austin. I mean, Austin's just got that cool vibe and everything else, but people don't realize that Houston's room to there's a lot of stuff. I mean, we talked about Alert Logic. That was probably the original cyber startup in Houston. If them or like Greylog's
right.
here as well. We've got Authenticate, which is here. Chad Spinsky, who helps me with the user group. He's a startup right here in downtown Houston. So there's a lot of cyber startups here that people don't know about.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, and when you were talking about the origin story of founding it in the first place, and wanting to get more of the getting away from the vendor centricity of the whole of some of the events.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing been going to RSAs and black hats for long enough to kind of see that evolution as well, where
Yeah.
RSA, I love going to RSA, but RSA is, to me, RSA is the vendor conference. That's where the vendors go and show their stuff. And traditionally, to me, Black Hat was more of the practitioner. Black Hat was more of the where this is where the people who actually do cybersecurity are going to go. And then going deeper into the weeds and a little bit into the gray/black hat area, you had DEF CON kind of riding on the coattails there. But I think that over the last decade, that even black hat has kind of evolved towards RSA, where it's just another RSA now. It is more vendor centric. So I think there's always room for that. The just providing information that isn't a vendor pitch.
And that I'd say the differences that we have, and I always see the danger in potentially becoming another. And again, I love RSA. I've been going to RSA since, I don't know. Well, I didn't get to go last year, but probably since about 2004 or something like that. I think I started going. So yeah, I've been to the majority of the ones in that time in the last 20 years. I've been to the majority of them and met a lot of friends, made most of the friends I had in social media, or back in the day before we really had Twitter or anything, with blogging and podcasts like Martin McKay and Alan Schimmel and Chris Hoff and Rich Mogul and all those folks. That's how I met a lot of those folks. And yeah, it has evolved quite a bit since then. And I think some of that, and you're right about Black Hat, it's evolved in some of that as well. I think the major differentiator that we're trying to keep is, one, if you look at both of those, what do they have in common? Excuse me just a second. Might have an edit point there, sorry.
No worries.
Is when you go to those, again, and this is not their fault, but generally you have to travel there and you have to spend a lot of money, but you're going to pay what, $2,500, $3,000 a ticket, depending on what it is. I don't remember what the rates are. S4 is the same way. Most of the larger conferences. I've even seen conferences start here locally, to your point earlier about we're not the only Houston cybersecurity conference. Like I didn't put a whole lot of massive thought and marketing thought into when I named it HOU.SEC.CON. But even they're starting out sometimes at, $750,000, $1,500 a ticket. And we're literally sitting here at $100 a ticket. And if you want a VIP, it's $50 more or something like that. And we're not ever going to get much higher than that. The only thing we've changed up this year is we've done some early bird pricing because we're trying to heavy load the front end to get people, incentivize them for buying tickets in the beginning. But even our other two conferences are, I think, $100 or $75 each. They're not expensive. And we rely on our sponsorships to pay for the vast majority of it. But we've proven that people will come to this to sponsor it because they see the value of it, because we've grown it. I mean, we were 2 years ago in 2023, we were at about 1,400 people. Last year, we were at 2,100 people. So, I mean, this year we're looking at upwards of 3,000 people. So whether or not we can continue that trajectory growth is one whole thing. But I do think when people nationally start looking at this and they're like, oh no, it's just another national conference that's popping up. Oh, wait a minute. It's only $150 to get into this thing. My boss will pay for that. They'll pay for my travel. I don't have $2,000, $2,500 on top of that I've got to worry about from a ticket.
Right.
So I mean, that's not our sole differentiator. I do think we strike a good balance between RSA and Black Hat, to your point, because we've and that actually it's more like Black Hat's in the middle somewhere from how we look at it. RSA, Black Hat, DEF.CON being, essentially pure hacker conference. And then some of those other hacker conferences, we've got a full village. We've got Capture the Flag there. We've got the lockpicking. We've got ham radio village. We're adding villages every year. We've got physical security. We've got all of those things. So we're trying to strike this balance between the two to get practitioners to come in there, and even introduce people that have never done lockpicking or done ham radio or whatever, have that geek cred to it. I mean, last year we had 80s video games. That was cool. We've got some really cool things planned this year. So we're always trying to strike that balance, keep for lack of a better term, a pure soul of a conference where people can go and enjoy it and have a good time, get very quality content. Our sponsored talks are kept very low from a ratio perspective to the call for papers. I mean, the vast, vast, vast majority of our tracks, the people are in their tracks that are submitting, are people who have submitted to a call for papers process, and we've got a committee that works on that. I think from a ratio perspective, it's extremely low from a sponsored talk, and we even have guidelines from a sponsored talk perspective. Like, you don't go in there and do a vendor pitch, or you're not going to be able to do this again type of thing. So we're just trying to keep it pure. We're not trying to be arrogant about it in any way, shape, or form. RSA has its place. Black Hat has its place. DEF.CON, all of them have their place. I've been to all of them, enjoy all of them. We're just trying to do something a little bit different. So.
Okay. Well, and in terms of, if I play out, the trajectory, and I say, okay, well, so now you've got these three conferences. You got RSA, you got Black Hat, you got HOU.SEC.CON. Not only is there the differentiations that you just described, but also conveniently, timing-wise, they're pretty well spaced. Whereas
absolutely.
You do one in the spring, one in the summer, one in the fall.
Well, so we're doing two
summer.
In the spring now. We did one in the summer. Summer's a bad time to do a conference because you never know how many people are going to be there. Even though Black Hat does it in the summer, they're well established. They don't have to worry about that. People are going to plan their vacations around that. But we do have a large gap between EXEC.SEC.CON and OT.SEC.CON and then HOU.SEC.CON. Part of that is to give the people who work on the team, a breather and let them plan for the other stuff. Yeah, they basically have a summer. But it's also, fall is the prime time, and especially in Houston, because you want to try to get where it starts at least cooling off a little bit.
Oh, come on now. You live in Houston. It does not cool off until February. It's only cool for 2 weeks.
Like right now,
we're back, our winter is almost over now, and it's going to be 80 again next week.
Yeah, we used to be well into October, and we're closer to the beginning of October now, which also scares me because of a hurricane thing. But hopefully we won't run into that ever. I don't know. I think that closer to that time frame, we run into a lot of stuff at the George R. Brown, because obviously George R. Brown's a popular place to have conferences, and so we've got to work with them a lot. But I just think we're on a trajectory. Honestly, it feels like the right kind of conference. The sponsors, the vendors who want to sponsor it, they've come back. They've grown and grown and grown and grown, and they keep coming back. We've sold many sponsorships, right? Like literally, we're getting signed contracts the day after HOU.SEC.CON closed last year. So they see value, and that's what we're trying to do. But honestly, our whole perspective for this is, and I think even more of a differentiator as we continue to evolve, is we're trying to be a community that happens to have a conference, if you will, right? Mm-hmm. We're growing some other things to it. We've got some stuff coming out this year where we'll do more media stuff. We'll do We're going to help build job board out where people can, and, turn that into, more where we got people just coming. Because I post that stuff on LinkedIn all the time. We're like, well, why not put that in a centralized spot? Because we've always done a job board at HOU.SEC.CON, but now we're going to make it available throughout the year.
Okay.
Mentorships, we've grown. I mean, all those things, that to me is like, if you go to RSA and you go to Black Hat, you go there, you have a good time that week, you see all your friends, you maybe learn some stuff, then you leave, and then you get some stuff in email from them throughout the year. But that's kind of it. We're trying to take it to the next level and build a real community where if you go there, we're not going to pester you. We're just going to make it a community where it's you're actually joining something that's kind of fun,
Yeah. You mentioned the job board, so I'm gonna take a slight pivot.
Yeah.
To talk more about an industry thing as opposed to a HOU.SEC.CON thing.
Absolutely.
So, we've had, tons of layoffs. We've been talking for years about this, the cybersecurity skills gap and, the whatever, I forget the stat, 3 million, 4 million, however many unfilled security jobs there are. And my friend Ben Rothke, I think, did a really good job of tearing that down. And
he did a
really
great job.
Really analyzing that and saying, these things don't add up. You can't tell me there's 4 million unfilled jobs while all these people are getting laid off and can't find work. And so I want to, I mean, you can go there, but I want to set aside for now all the flaws in the job listing application system. I just went through it for 14 months myself, so I know what a shit show that is. Like you're just applying, you don't ever hear back, et cetera, et cetera. But what I wanted to do is kind of like mash that whole concept with what we've got coming down the pipe in terms of Gen AI, and you look at and I realize this is not cybersecurity specific, it's developer specific, but you look at Salesforce where they were like, hey, we've got this hiring freeze, and oh, by the way, we're just not going to hire people because we're just going to have AI agents do the programming for us. And it creates kind of a bleak picture. And it's like, I know we've been saying, or every vendor I've talked to, I mean, I've been doing interviews now for, a couple of years on generative AI and everyone's generative AI tools. And every single person I've talked to has opened with the line, as if their lawyers told them that it was a requirement. We're not going to replace people. We're here to augment people. AI is not going to take your job. It's going to help you do your job. And it's like, okay, I get where you're going. And I think that that's true for some jobs. And I think that's true on some level. But also, it is very much going to replace a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
So there wasn't really a question in there, but
no. So I'll say from a cybersecurity perspective, even before the advent of the modern LLMs and what's enabled us to start even really actually thinking about replacing jobs, and I'm not advocating, I'm just saying it's a possibility, just as you are. There was already a class of tools that specifically were, you could call them virtual SOCs, you could call them, there wasn't a term MDR at the time, but there's just a lot of tools that were saying, look, we're going to use an amalgamation of SIM and SOAR and machine learning and what they did call AI back then to really whittle down the number of alerts that were coming into your security operations center so you could reduce potentially the need to have like level 1 analyst type of a role. They've been talking about that for a long time now. I mean, I've been in my job here, or at least this company, accepting the fact that we got bought by another company, but I'm still been like at the same group essentially for the last over 7 years. And I've been hearing that story ever since I got here, and it's never happened. Now, what's the difference between then and now is that you've got something can actually do that job to some degree, or at least has a whole vast amount of potential compared to what those old
Right.
things did. So the concept has been there. Hell, I've been talking about that and talking to vendors about that, about, we can take over 2 or 3 FTEs for you, and you can, to your point, repurpose them, make those people do something else. But this is a true threat to some of those, especially lower level, and I don't mean that disparagingly, just people like entry level, I should say, analyst roles. That has become the primary way that people have entered cybersecurity probably for the last 5 years, versus old guys like us who came up from the networking and IT ranks. A lot of people are getting out of college and they're learning how to do analyst type of roles. That's kind of a primary thing, and it's seen as that way. And now all of those roles have the potential to literally, I do think within the next 5 years, a ton of those jobs can go away using, and the MDRs are talking about it. A lot of them, I talked to one today that was talking about it. I've seen them all develop it. So, so I do think there's potential for taking those. What does that mean? I think there's going to be ultimately different paths for people to get into security. I think there's a potential for people to pivot if they've got a technical mindset and to go back more into an IT type of a career network, because that stuff still exists. You still need some of that. But I do think it will probably whittle down the number of people who apply for it, the number of people who see that as a career path. What I also think it'll do is have an effect on universities and colleges who have put years and years and years of time into growing curriculum around cybersecurity, and they're probably going to see a drop in the number of students that apply for that, and they're going to pivot to other things. I don't think at the higher level, people who've been around and experienced for a long time are going to see as much of an effect. I think it's really going to be more of those entry level jobs. That's my take on it.
Okay, well, I agree, but my I guess it's not really a counterpoint, but I guess my response would be, there will still be, people getting older, retiring, whatever, leaving. There will still need to be people funneling into cybersecurity. It's not that, but it just means that your entry level is now level 2. Your entry level is, you're coming in to a job where instead of being the guy analyzing all of the log data to, figure out what to focus on and then elevating that to a level 2, you're the level 2. You're just going to use an AI to help you get there.
Absolutely.
So to that end, it's true. It will augment what you're able to do, and I think to some extent, it kind of democratizes access, because it means that I don't necessarily need to be a cybersecurity expert. I mean, it's helpful. It would be nice to know, have a clue about what the AI is telling me. But to some extent, if the AI is doing all the grunt work and it just says, "Hey, just go here, push this button, apply this patch," you don't really need to be a cybersecurity expert necessarily to do that. So I mean, but I think in the end it does result in, and this is not unique to cybersecurity. It's true of journalism. It's true of content marketing. It's true of developers. It's true of everyone, that what ends up happening is, you're removing, you're elevating what is entry level. It's not that you're removing it. You're just because like I said, someone still has to enter. There has to be an entry level, but you're elevating what is entry level, but you're also dramatically decreasing the headcount necessary to do the same job. And while in security, we talk about that a lot from the standpoint that you pointed out, which is we've always framed these tools, we've always framed cybersecurity solutions as, yes, but if you use this SIM, if you use this SOAR, if you use this platform, it's going to streamline everything and help you focus on what matters most, so that you can be more creative and be more proactive and do the things that you should be doing, but you don't have time to go do. And I think that's very valuable, and that's true, but it's also finite. It's like, like, it's not that every single person who's currently a level 1 is going to get reassigned to go do something more creative and proactive. It's like, yeah, some of them will, and some of them will be let go.
And they'll have to adjust and find if they've got a technical mindset and a technical acumen, I think they'll figure out where to go. This is not me going, just suck it up and deal with it. I mean, there's genuine concerns there, and I get it. And I mean, AI is going to change a lot of stuff. I mean, you and I had a conversation not too long ago about it at lunch, where there's aspects to the, if you want to call it the AI revolution, whether it's here or not, I don't know, but that have people who you would think are generally against something like this, but are for, basic income for people that who can't have certain roles or don't have the acumen to be technical or want to pursue more of an artsy type of an arts, degree or, be creative and those kind of things. Because a lot of people who are in IT also, a lot of people don't know this that are outside of IT and security. Most of the people I know that are in IT and security don't have degrees in that. They have, other degrees, and a lot of them are like musical degrees and things like that. So I think on the one hand, there's going to be suffering and at some level. That's just always the case when it comes to things changing like this, and AI can enable other things to happen or let you move to other places. Maybe you don't, there's going to be changes, and it sucks, but
and which I think, for those of us, if you want to be honest, it's like that's the honest look at it. Is it does a lot of things fairly well, and it's going to get better.
Yep.
And so there's, from a pure common sense logic perspective, there's no reason not to let the AI do what the AI can do. That said, like you said, there's going to be a pain period, and that's always kind of been my thing is, and I think we talked about this at lunch, like you said, that ultimately I'm like, I grew up on Star Trek. I'm all for the utopian Starfleet future where we all can just do other things or whatever.
Yeah.
But there's a pain point to get there, because while we will probably get to a point of saying, hey, let's examine what makes sense in terms of a universal basic income, or how do we make sure people have food, clothing, housing, healthcare if they don't have jobs. Like, that's a conversation that needs to be had. But in the short term, we're just going to have a lot of people displaced from jobs. And there's only so many Starbucks to work at. There's only so many people ordering their food from DoorDash. I mean, so it's like, the options are limited.
I mean, even the fast food industry is judge me if you want, but I go to Taco Bell every once in a while. And like the last time I went there, the one that's closest by my house, when we go there, I do all the ordering using AI. It's like, and even a lot of people now are ordering, even before AI, they were ordering on their phone. All of the fast food restaurants and all that have apps.
Well, they incentivize you to, because there's
Absolutely.
always deals that you only get in the app, so it's
exactly.
Like they're not so subtly pushing you to say, listen, we'd like to get rid of some of these people who were paying, whatever it is, $10 an hour, $12 an hour, $18 an hour. We'd like to get rid of some of those people. So if you could just use the app, we'll give you free fries.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And now I still I ordered through the app on Chick-fil-A, and I still see like 50 people running around there. So it doesn't feel like they've cut their staff down any, but I also have, a kid that works there, and he does talk about how they have staffing pressures there as well to knock down the number of people who are working from, at least all the time. So,
yeah.
And
aside though, real quick, aside from everyone's going to be out of work and we need to get to universal basic income and whatever that transition looks like. In the middle, there is what you talked about, which is there are a lot of opportunities to pivot, so it's like, and it's a very trite example, But when the automobile came along, we no longer needed people to do, horseshoes or make wagon wheels. Like those things were, are unnecessary. And entire industries that focused on that had to be like, all right, well, now what do we do? But other things come along because now I need someone to fix the carburetor. It's like that. So there are different things that pop up. And so, we can, you can focus on, well, I had aspirations of this cybersecurity career, and now it seems like that maybe is somewhat of a dead end to some extent. Now what? And it's like, okay, well, maybe go look at all the stuff behind the AI. Like someone's got to make all that shit. Someone's got to make sure it's running. Someone's got to, you need all kinds of stuff around that. So there's whole new industries of prompt engineers. There's whole new industries of LLM QA. Like someone's got to keep checking to make sure that Whopper doesn't start a nuclear war.
Well, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, and that people are gonna. I mean, companies of all sorts and sizes all around using AI exist. So even if AI is able to do a lot of the functionality of whatever they're offering to you in some magic app or, website or whatever, all of the parts behind it still are there. So until they get full 100%, robotized where it's, a mechanical person doing it, then you're going to need that. I think that's still a long way off. Right. Even the AI perspective, I mean, Chris Hoff made a great point the other day on LinkedIn. He's like, it was more of a rant about marketing and, sales things, but it was like, they're talking about how you can do all this stuff with AI and how he's like, who has used it to replace a whole team? We've seen that a couple of places, like very, very, very specific use cases. The trend is there, but I still think we're a pretty good ways away from people just totally being, okay, this is not the way to go. Now, if you're just entering college and you're looking at this realistically, it is absolutely something you should be thinking about and counselors should be thinking about. And I know that trend takes a long time sometimes to catch up. So it'll be interesting to see over the next 5 to 10 years how many people get into the industry and just still absolutely can't find anything. And before colleges start going, okay, maybe we should pivot some more of that curriculum over, to your point, prompt engineering or whatever. And some of them are more quicker on that than others, but.
Yeah. Well, and I just, not out yet, but I just, do you know Den Jones?
I don't think so, no.
He did Zero Trust at Adobe, and then he was at Banyan Security, and he recently started 909 Cyber. So I just recorded. I was a guest on his podcast.
Oh, okay.
And we were talking about AI from a marketing perspective, and I said, listen, if I was picking industries that are going to fold, because of AI, I'd say mine's first, because. From it does a halfway decent job at writing. But one of the things we talked about is, it was kind of mirrored what you were saying Hoff was talking about, which is you can kind of tell when a company is like, well, we don't need to hire any marketing people. We've got ChatGPT. And it's like, yeah, but I can tell you're using ChatGPT. So you still need someone who actually understands
absolutely
the product and service that you're trying to talk about, or the topic in some way. Like ChatGPT is pretty good at coming up with a basic framework of this is a coherent, article about this topic, but you still need someone with actual experience and knowledge to hone that into something that has value. And that was, I think, one of the, and again, this will change because we do have more reasoning models of AI, and it is going to get there. But as it stands right now, the ChatGPTs of the world, all they're good at is regurgitating the stuff that already exists. So when you have it create something for you, you're using the term loosely, it can't possibly provide any unique value because it's only repurposing stuff that already exists.
To me, it is a very fancy and quick way of doing exactly what you and I did when we wrote our essays in high school and college, is we went and did a bunch of research. We took what those authors were saying. We wrote it a different way so the teacher, couldn't be like, hey, you're plagiarizing this. But to your point, what we have is like a step above, and especially if we were actually trying to work on it. A lot of people, you just wrote it and you sent it and you hope you got a C and you didn't care. But if, if you wanted to write something with some original thought in it, then you would add something to that. So I think it's doing that. Now I've had this conversation about it as it sits right now. It's an enabler to come to a point where you can start having original thought quicker, you being the human using it.
Right.
So I just worked on a presentation for a customer. I presented it to them last week. I used ChatGPT to do the research for me. I would have done the exact same thing. I would have gone out to all these websites and gathered all of this information and put this timeline together and all of that. I used ChatGPT to do that for me, to get the timeline, just, get my basic thoughts together. And it did that for me in a matter of like 20 minutes. I was able to get my basic timeline. Why not use a tool like that?
Right.
Now, to your point, the next level is write this for me and come up with some original thought. When it can start doing that, then you're literally at real AI, and all the terms. It's like,
well, while I was talking with Dan, I had this epiphany too, because we were talking about sort of the stigmatization of AI, and I talked about this in the past too, about how when Google first hit and you had businesses and schools saying, well, you can't use Google, that's cheating. Like, you got to go to the library and do research the old-fashioned way. And it's like, and it quickly evolved from that to, well, no, you absolutely are, you're required to Google things.
Yeah.
And that is, so some people will say, well, you shouldn't use AI to do this, that, or the other thing, because that's cheating. And while we were talking about it, I had this thought where I was like, it's not any different than like a CEO or an executive at a company. They've got an executive assistant and they've got a team of managers, and like, they're not coming up with every single thing they think of. They've got a team of people to surface ideas to them. Now they're looking at those things and picking and choosing and saying, okay, yes, let's do that one. No, let's not do that one. Okay, these are good, but let's refine them. So they're playing a role, but they're not doing it all themselves. They have people to do that. So I'm just saying AI is that same thing for those of us at the lower levels. That now I have generative AI to act as my team of people to help me ideate and help me refine the way I'm thinking. To your point, like, I can write an article or a white paper or a whatever, and I could think, hey, this is pretty good. I think I've covered it. But you can also just kind of pop it into one of the generative AIs and just say, hey, is there, is there something I missed? Is there another angle on this? Is there another perspective on this? And it can very quickly just say, oh yeah, well, did you think of this? And you go, oh, shit, didn't think of that.
Didn't think of that. Well, and I had somebody else I was asking the question. I had them using Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, to write, to come up with some of that research. I took her stuff, fed it into ChatGPT and said, what do you think about that? And it was like, oh, what about this? So I had two AIs, from two different instances doing the same thing, and they essentially came up with the same answer for the most part. But yeah, it helps me, because then I'll go, well, what do you think? What did I miss here? Just to your point, and it several times it brought up something, or like if I wanted to know about, hey, back in 2000 there was a vendor that did this. I mean, I could try to Google that and figure it out, or I could throw it in ChatGPT, and it's going to tell me in a matter of, 2 seconds,
right,
that was this vendor. So I don't know. I just see it as another tool at this point, but there's absolutely a trend for it to take over some things that are basic things that we think of now.
Right. Well, I think your guidance is good in terms of, because I hadn't really thought about it at that level, but to say, hey, listen, if you're in college, if you're going into college, if you're coming out of college, at least be aware. Like, look at the landscape and plan accordingly.
Yeah, be ready for it. and don't just think of ChatGPT as a tool to help write your paper. Use it as this is a legitimate quote unquote threat to what I thought was a potential career. Maybe I should look at it in a different way. Maybe ask it what you should do. Maybe ChatGPT will tell you what it thinks. It will. I know. I've actually asked it the question before. So,
all right. Well, as we're almost at time. I want to wind the things down, but I'm gonna bring it back. I will say that when I publish this, when I share the podcast, I will include links to HOU.SEC.CON, to the HSC user group. I'll make sure that people have the resources to find those things. But as a closing from you, I wanted to kind of give you the floor to talk about, for anyone who, maybe hasn't attended HOU.SEC.CON, what would you say to those people to say, hey, maybe you should look at HOU.SEC.CON and come join us this year?
So I think a lot of it is what I talked about before, which is the differentiators to it. We're building a community that has a conference that has other aspects to it. HOU.SEC.CON is absolutely kind of the flagship of that community, but you're going to see a lot of changes here in 2025 as we announce and get more stuff. You're going to see us how we're kind of coming together as that community and putting it all kind of together. So we're offering a lot of value, and we're doing it in such a way that's not like costly and onerous for anybody to be able to. We never want to make that a barrier to it. I would say if you want a really wide range of different kind of talks that are submitted and, I don't want to say curated, but reviewed at a grassroots level. You've lost some of that at some of the larger conferences, and we're doing that here still. And I think you'll really, really enjoy it. Look at it as a central spot in the U.S. and it doesn't cost a lot to come to Houston for it. And if you come this year, you're going to see that next evolution of what we're trying to do. That in and of itself, I'm excited about. And I think you should be here to take a look at it. So
awesome. Well, always a pleasure. Thank you for taking the time to join me.
Thanks, Tony. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you investing your time to listen to the podcast, but I also invite you to engage on social media. Please go like our Facebook page and follow at TechSpective on Twitter and Instagram. You can feel free to let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, let me know if you love it, let me know if it sucks, and let me know what products you'd like to see reviewed or what questions you'd like to see answered in future posts.